Good evening. I'm Dave Alden. I'm the Executive Director of Petaluma Urban Chat. This is weird. I hear it more from the speaker than my own mouth. I'll adjust. I'm thrilled all of you are here this evening. Really appreciate this. I want to start off by announcing the electeds and appointeds who have joined us this evening. I think we have two City Council people, both Dennis Posate and Kevin McDonald. Thanks for being here. From the Planning Commission, we have Darren Recusen, just arrived. Good to see you. From the Climate Action Commission, Ned Orrid is here. And then the other person I wanted to mention, Veronica Olson is here somewhere. She's not appointed, there she is, but she is heading up the effort for STAT, which will be a weekend from now. If STAT doesn't sound familiar to you, talk to Veronica before you leave this evening. It's a pretty cool thing. You need to be involved.
I would also recognize Kevin Bjorky from the Pedestrian Advisory Committee.
Kevin, you and I exchanged emails. We have not met face to face, so my apologies.
Okay, cool.
Very good. The topic tonight is going to be actually, before we get going, two administrative notes. The cafe is open. If you want to go in there quietly and get a beverage, please do so. He was very gracious in terms of letting us use this deck this evening. Also, we have a sign-up list over here. We're not going to hammer you with emails. We will put you on a list if you wish, but we just want to count of who is here this evening. It helps the developer as he later goes through the process. Plus, we want to know. The topic tonight is what's now going to be called the Weaver Hotel. It's about a block from here. It's the reason we meet here. We can pretty much see the site. It has been one way or another in the city process for 14 years now. This is the latest iteration. Not going to say whether or not I think it should go ahead, but I'm glad people keep trying and looking for the right fit. The first speaker this evening will be the president of the development company, EKN, Ebbie Nakhjavani. I'm sorry, I'll eventually get there. Nakhjavani. You know, I just learned today as I was reading the email we sent out, Ebbie is a civil engineer. Very few civil engineers become developers. I think this is really cool. Although I'll note that my number is lower than your number, so I got there first. Anyway, Ebbie will give a few comments regarding the hotel. He will then introduce the project architect. At the end of the evening, we will have Q&A. I'll come back up and monitor that. So please, as you're listening this evening, be jotting down your questions. Be prepared. We can stay here as long as you want, as long as you have questions. Again, thanks for being here.
Thank you, Dave. I appreciate it. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for coming, everyone that was recognized. Thanks for attending. I first want to actually tell you that I'm going to be looking at my phone, not because I'm rude, but I wanted to look young, so instead of written notes, I wrote it on my phone. Again, thank you, Ebbie Nakhjavani. I'm President CEO of EKN Development Group. You can Google us. There's a lot of information on our website about what we do, what projects we have, so probably the best way to get some history on us. EKN Development Group was formed in 1995 and initially started as a retail developer. So we did a lot of shopping centers. My history is I used to be with Simon Property Group, so we did a lot of regional malls, and I did development for our own company as well as hired gun for big development companies all across the United States. My company is a generational company, so both my sons work for me, and that's really important to us. Every project that we do it, we're here to stay. We don't sell and run, build, sell and run. We integrate into the community. I started around 2010-11, and we sort of changed the way the company was developing from mainly retail and shopping centers to doing more what we call hospitality anchored projects. So a lot of the projects we do has a hotel component, and what it has is we either add food and beverage, restaurants, sometimes residential, sometimes retail. So they're mainly mixed use with all kinds of different things incorporated in that. A little bit of background on how I came to Petaluma, other than wine tasting, of course, the obvious. So very familiar with the area. But we actually were brought in. There was a previous owner who had proposed the hotel here and tried to get a brand for it. The brand told them that all the brands told them that you need to bring somebody who has experience in hotel development, otherwise we can't franchise it. So I was actually introduced to the previous owner by the brand. We came up to Petaluma. I always loved Petaluma, and looked at the site, really liked the site. And we first started as a joint venture with the previous owner, and we worked together for about 1.5 years, maybe 2 years. And Ross decided to exit and said, look, you know what you're doing, and just, I don't want to, get in your way, so why don't I exit, and if you're interested, why don't you take the property? So that's what we did. And so we're moving forward with the development of the property pretty much substantially in the same type of the project that Ross had. We changed it a little bit to meet brand standards and some architectural changes, but generally it's about the same type of a project. So that's how we were introduced to the property, and what we're doing is really building a project that we believe, and I think Jessica, our architect with Paige, is going to get more in detail. I don't want to get myself in trouble. I'm an engineer, not an architect, so I shouldn't be talking about buildings. But we generally, everywhere we go, we try to actually pick architecture that is really current, is new, and it really is timeless rather than trendy. So that's our focus, and also that integrates very well into the community. So there was Jessica's company did a lot of research, worked with a historic consultant, etc., local, which was actually a requirement of the project, to make sure, and again she'll get more into it, to make sure that the project borrows and is inspired by a lot of the local architecture and something that fits in and it's not an eyesore. Really, why Petaluma though for EKN? And that's probably a really important question. If you look at our website, we have a few projects that we did across the country, but in 2018-19, we decided that we wanted to get out of urban areas. There was too much competition, and this kind of premonition came to me before even COVID. And we decided to actually really focus really more on, because we're owner and keepers of our projects, we wanted to be more in areas where they're away and not so much in the hustle and bustle of downtown San Francisco, Chicago, etc. So if you look at our current projects that we're contemplating, we have Kapalua, Hawaii, in Maui we're building. We have Grand Canyon, we're building a big project there. We have North Lake Tahoe, we're building a project there. So all of our locations since that time have really converted to places that they have a soul, and would really focus on something that a lot of developers don't do. We really work hard to integrate into what are the uses of the project that integrates well into the community. So, Petaluma, all about celebrating food, celebrating neighbors, celebrating the community. And what a lot of people also don't understand, and we're doing this in Tahoe very intently, is that projects really survive because of the community. Everybody thinks that the project's going to survive just because a lot of people from everywhere else are going to come and stay there. But our experience has been that our restaurants, our bars, for it to survive, guests come to stay there because they see a vibrant community. It's not somebody who comes in and checks in for a night or two and checks out the next day. They're here to really absorb and enjoy what's in the community. So it's not just where the hotel is, but also who's at the hotel and what's happening. So this is a very unique project. It's a boutique hotel. I believe we have 93 keys. Only the lobby, we wanted to make sure that we take advantage of sort of what's already here in Petaluma. So rather than just have kind of a boring lobby, the first floor and as Jessica will explain, is all food and restaurant. It's not going to be just kind of the obligatory hotel rubber chicken type of a restaurant. We're going to bring a chef, and we're going to really add to the Petaluma experience great wines, beer, etc. Kind of again celebrating what's already here, farm to table. And then one of the things that we're doing that's different, it's building was 5 stories, we're keeping it that way. But we're taking advantage of the roof that's already there, and we're adding a rooftop bar. And again, what we're doing that for is, again, we think that the majority of the customers are going to be you guys. Birthdays, anniversaries, Valentine's Day, Mother's Day, Father's Day. That's where you want to sit on that rooftop and really enjoy the views, enjoy the river. In Petaluma right now, there isn't a place to go do that, and it's a wealth of views. Looking at the hills, it's a beautiful location, and we're very well situated for that. So again, taking advantage of that, where we actually have a couple of projects, and I see a friend sitting here from Rochester, Minnesota, and a little quick anecdote is, I built 4 hotels in Rochester, Minnesota, right by Mayo Clinic. And one of the sites that we actually acquired, very similar to this, was a gas station that we bought. And the Nelson brothers had owned the gas station. Their father had owned it, and they owned it for another 40, 50 years. And when I went to acquire that property, everybody said, "You're crazy. Don't touch that property. The Kutsky neighborhood will kill you. They won't ever let you build a project here." And they were right. The first meeting that I had like this, about 300 people showed up. They all said, "We don't want to build the project." Just to fast forward, 2.5 years later, we met with the neighborhood, we listened to them, we talked about what the issue was, and this was a tough project. It was zoned for a hotel, but it was right in the middle of the neighborhood. And not only all those 300 people showed up at the city council hearing in favor of the project, but Emily, who was the president of the association, stood at the counter and said, "I want a unanimous vote because the entire neighborhood has worked with this developer. They've addressed all of our concerns, and we want this project." So, and that's what we do. We don't try to go in and build something that doesn't fit, that's not zoned. We work with the staff, with planning commission, with city council, and we really respect what fits into the community. So here in Petaluma, one of the important key considerations was what this project wants to be. What kind of a hotel does it want to be? There's all kinds of choices. It's anywhere from Best Western to a non-branded boutique hotel. We only build what they call institutionally tradable brands. So we're Marriott, Hilton, Hyatt, or IHG. So one of those 4 brands. We're actually talking to 2 of those brands, and they're very interested in being here. The reason they want to be here is this is a boutique, but they have what they call soft brands. So this is not going to be like a Holiday Inn or anything like that. It'll be the Weaver, as they refer to it, and but it'll be branded by one of those brands. So if it's a Hilton or a Hyatt, you go on their website, it shows up. But it will be the Hotel Weaver. There are very few of those everywhere, but all of the brands are gravitating towards that because a standard brand has a lot of, bells and whistles. You have to comply with the architect, what they want you to do. They're soft brands. You can actually create something like this, use their brand, so people are making reservation on their website, but it has its own character. It has its own name, and we, especially for Petaluma, we wanted to do that because this is not to knock any of these retailers, but this city is not Denny's and Starbucks and Holiday Inn. And if you go drive up and down, everything is highly curated, highly local. It has a soul, and so that was one of the main reasons why we picked the name, and we picked the soft brand to do this. The total project is going to be around $40 million. Restaurants are going to be, like I said, the rooftop bar is going to be very curated in terms of farm to table food and menu. And in terms of what we bring to the table for this project, is that we stay and we make sure the project fits into the community. I actually have a couple of our staff here. Evan, I think you lived here. Evan, why don't you come up and say, so Evan works with us, and he also is from Petaluma. You want to introduce yourself? Okay.
Hi, I'm Evan Politich. Nice to meet all you. I'm not from Petaluma. I'm from Orinda, California, which is over in the East Bay Area. And,
okay, so you're out. Go.
Okay. No, but I grew up coming here with my parents, and have very fond memories of going to the Antique Festival and going to a lot of the shops. And I was actually going back through my Instagram, and I noticed that my 3 first photos were all photos that I took in an art gallery that I improperly said that were mine, but that's what a 15-year-old does. But I've been working with EKN for the past 3 years since I graduated college, and I actually went to school with Ebbie's son, Aria, and when it was my time to graduate, he reached out to me and said, "Hey, like I've played water polo with you for 3 years, and I really enjoyed you as a person, and I really want you to come join our family and join the company in more of that sense." So I've been here since, and I plan to stay here for as long as I can. But I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and present this project to all of you.
Thank you, Evan. So Evan is one of our project managers that will be working on this project, and I think he's going to use this as an excuse to go to Orinda and visit his family every time. Also, Heather does all of our events planning, and she's director of events and arts, so she'll be very heavily involved with selecting the art. We're very art-centric as well. We want our hotels to be able to inspire. And so, again, celebrating arts and music and all kinds of events throughout the year. So I'll let Heather introduce herself. And
hi, my name is Heather Knapp. I'm definitely better behind a camera than in front of one. I joined EKN because I grew up in small towns with a lot of culture and flavor, and I feel that it's very important when you come into a town to get a feel for the town and curate that feeling, especially in these projects. It's very important to me. It's very close to my heart. I grew up in a very tiny town in Wyoming, so this old town is just so beautiful to me. But yeah, I joined EKN for that purpose, and I hope that I can get to know some of you and bring some of the flavor of Petaluma into this project.
Thank you. Thank you, Heather. Obviously, as a hotel, we're also hoping to benefit financially the community. So clearly, TOT tax, there's going to be transitory occupancy tax that will be, I think the 20-year to 20-year number is around 20 million that will go actually to the city. Obviously, the project will be assessed based on its valuation, and the property tax that will be paid will be part of it. I know will come actually back to Petaluma and will be used as a source for funding various projects here. I think with that, I'm gonna hope to see you all for the all of the events that we have on the street, and the Rooftop bar is open for you guys to visit and watch all the parades go by. So with that, I'm going to invite Jessica up, and if you could come up, Jessica, and kind of walk us through the architecture. And then I'll be available for any questions after Jessica is done. Thank you.
Thank you, Ebbie. So I'm not as cool as Ebbie. I'm not reading my notes off of my phone. I have them printed out old school, which might age me. I'm Jessica Sager. I'm the design director for housing and hospitality at our firm called Page. I actually moved to the Bay Area 22 years ago and fell into hospitality architecture a little bit by chance, but I've really enjoyed that field and practice of architecture, and I've worked on projects all over the world, but I have to say it's extra special to be able to work on a project that feels like it's in my backyard. It's comes rare opportunity to do it every once in a while, so it's really an honor to be working on this project. And I'm joined by my colleague, Sam Gelfand, who is the project architect, and just wanted to acknowledge him. It's been a really wonderful process working on this project. EKN is an incredible partner, and we've also worked locally with Diana Painter, the historian, who's helped advise us and kind of bounce ideas. Everyone at the city's been really wonderful in helping make this project better and better, as well as our branding and interiors group, who's not here today. So I have 5 pages of notes. I tried to make sure I go through every detail of the building with you all, so you all understand it. But our project, Hotel Weaver, is located at the southwest corner of Petaluma Boulevard and B Street. So I'm going to point to some of these exhibits up here. So Petaluma Boulevard is running here. B Street is over here in this rendering. This will be kind of the first exhibit to really look at. And Ebbie pointed out, well, our hotel is 93 keys, 5-story, all electric, lifestyle hotel with a rooftop terrace. And it's important to call out sort of that boutique lifestyle component, because it's really sort of intrinsic to this project and Petaluma itself. And for those who aren't hospitality experts, you know, lifestyle hotel, as we describe it, is really unique in its character and distinctive. It's not really akin to how a lot of us think about some traditional hotels, which is much more cookie cutter, prescribed, very insular. You know, guests come to the hotel, they kind of stay and live in the hotel. This hotel is definitely outward focused, unique, independent. That's really typified by interior and exterior architecture design, with an emphasis on the vibrant social scene for both the guests and the locals. So it's really both meant for the guests, but as much for the guests, it's for the local community and that vibrant social scene. So included typically in lifestyle hotels on the ground floor, you'll have space that's really about social interaction, a food and beverage program with regionally inspired menus, which is part of the aspiration here, craft cocktails, and programming that involves local artists and has a distinctive sense of play. So thinking about the hotel beyond the confines of its exterior walls, it's our hope that the guests of Hotel Weaver will explore downtown Petaluma as much as possible. 2 intentional architectural moves that I just wanted to point out in this little introduction is the really opening of the ground floor to the street was a really important architectural move. As well as the rooftop amenity, which is not for the guest itself, but really for the public. There's a rooftop bar located up there, which we'll describe in more later. But that rooftop's really seen as this public place for locals to come and gather, take in the views, relax, and drink. The historic piece is important. We work closely, as I mentioned, with Diana Painter to really understand the historical context. And we shared with her through months of working on this, design concepts, architecture, massing, building details to really ensure that even though this is a new building, it's new construction, modern technology, that we want to make sure the proportions, the rhythm, some of the elements and details have a connection to the context, and Diana has really been a strong supporter of the project and our design. And then lastly, in this introduction, just wanted to touch on the branding. Branding is really important with lifestyle hotels, boutique hotels, and the branding of Hotel Weaver has been a really important part for the architecture and design team in developing sort of what you see visually on these boards. Finding inspiration in the local culture, landscape, and the history, I wanted to just share one unique quote from our branding narrative that our team developed just to kick off the presentation. In the historic heart of downtown, Petaluma's premier boutique hotel invites guests to an experience as captivating as the town itself, merging the warmth of hometown charm with innovative design and craftsmanship. It is a place to discover the very best of Petaluma, all under one roof in the very center of it all. Okay. I'm going to dive into our next exhibit a bit. This is our ground floor plan. And then just to orient everybody, you can kind of see in the bold print, this is Petaluma Boulevard and B Street here. Wanted to just, use the plan to illustrate how much we're really maximizing the public area and frontage along B Street and Petaluma Boulevard. We have about 100 linear feet of storefront along Petaluma Boulevard, not including the hotel lobby and entrance over here. And then we have nearly 50 feet of storefront on B Street. And again, this is really meant to activate that street edge. And it's carved back right here on the corner, so the building envelope actually steps in at the corner, and we've introduced a series of operable doors. So the indoor restaurant and bar really can spill out to the edge of the property, and we have outdoor seating, again, to kind of activate that street edge and also think about kind of the scale of the pedestrian. Volumetrically, this ground floor is 15 feet from the ground floor to level 1, and this was an important architectural move to really ensure that the restaurant and bar has, the right proportion and a comfortable experience for the diners and guests. And the 15 feet, and you can see it illustrated here, this is sort of that 15-foot datum line I'm speaking to. That was also a deliberate architectural move that we looked at with Diana, which allows that ground floor to then relate to some of the surrounding buildings, which also have a very similar proportion and height at that ground level storefront. In this floor plan, a lot of the back of house components, there's a valet and baggage area that connects to the front office to support that arrival. We've really kind of pushed that as far down the street as possible. We wanted to have as little back of house presence on those main streets. And then in addition to that, we've really pushed some of the kind of pragmatic components of a project like this, like parking, transformer, exiting from the hotel. We've also pushed that as far away from our prime northern corner. And that's really thinking about that pedestrian experience and wanting to make sure that the kind of the car and the traffic is really removed as much as possible from that street edge. The lobby itself is pretty small and intimate. This is pretty typical of some of these lifestyle soft brands where there's really less of an emphasis on big lobbies and much more, again, focused on that social scene. So you'll see proportionally that lobby is much smaller of an area than the bar and the restaurant itself, and in fact the restaurant has an opportunity to kind of spill out into that area. Ebbie mentioned that even though this is a boutique hotel, it's associated with a larger brand, and the restaurant too will be branded, not in the sense of a traditional hotel restaurant, but more of a kind of special and unique dining experience that locals will want to come and experience. I mentioned the car drop-off, and then also to point out a lot of our other back-of-house pieces, the laundry and housekeeping, the kitchen for the restaurant, it's really removed from the street. So wanted to move on to our typical floor plan. Again, Petaluma Boulevard here, B Street over here. Our prime corner that you see, this is our northern corner, which I'll point out in the rendering, is this corner right here. We have programmed as one of our 2-bay suites, and that was an intentional move to get some of that living room space out, looking out onto the street edge. And in a similar way, that's really how we've organized the floor plan of these hotel rooms, just as much as that ground floor restaurant looks out and activates the street. We wanted the rooms to feel like they were part of that streetscape. So you'll see the majority of the rooms are really oriented along Petaluma Boulevard South and B Street. To the south, we've carved away a little courtyard. We have a few rooms looking out to the south with some really nice, generous balconies. And at level 2, below this, we have a small fitness area. So this courtyard has a nice kind of southern exposure and feels kind of activated and warm. We'll look at the elevations in a little more detail, but until then, it's important to point out a lot of these guest rooms have balconies associated with them, specifically along Petaluma Boulevard. And this was really done to activate and emphasize the street. I don't want to jump ahead, but the balconies I just pointed out in plan, you can see here in the rendering. And those, are additional amenities for the guest room, but it was a really important architectural massing move to really look at some of the context of Petaluma and kind of the scale and rhythm of the buildings you have in town, and really try and relate kind of the rhythm and modulation of this building, which is otherwise somewhat horizontal with some strong vertical moves. And the balconies really help to do that quite a bit. Okay. I am going to next move to our rooftop. Although, let me touch on one thing before I move to the rooftop. I wanted to touch on our level 5 and some of the important massing moves. So this is the last level of guest rooms, level 5. And hopefully you can see from the rendering, and probably even more so the final aerial rendering, we found an opportunity at level 5, where most of our suites are located, to step the guest rooms back on this floor. And that was a really deliberate and intentional move, being mindful of what's written in the zoning language as a height limit, a 45-foot height limit. We wanted to create a datum line at the floor line of level 5 that was sat below the 45-foot height limit, and really set those rooms back as much as possible. And even more so, I'll point out, on the prime corner, we have a bridal suite at level 5, and we've stepped that massing back even more dramatically, just to kind of to really express that 45-foot height as much as possible. Looking at the building in total, this is a type 1 concrete construction, and we have a concrete slab, which is really great because it allows us to really create a thinner floor plate and compress the volume of the building down as much as possible. So while we have our 15-foot height to create that great ground floor restaurant and bar, we can really be efficient with the floor-to-floor height in our guest rooms. I talked about the bridal suite, and a lot of these balconies too are great opportunities for the guests to really look onto Petaluma Boulevard. We know that there's the butter and egg parade, and we imagine that there's some great vantage points throughout the project. So moving on to our rooftop, equally as public as our ground floor restaurant, the rooftops really envisioned as a community amenity. There's a very small volume, I'll point it out here. There's a small volume of event space and back of house support at this level, which is confined as much as possible to resemble what you would typically see on a lot of buildings at rooftops, which is a mechanical penthouse. So our design team really tried to work with programming to make sure we have, restrooms to serve the public. We have a really great north and west facing bar that's part of the public. And then the event space is imagined again as having pretty dramatic walls that are operable. So the event space really is more of a flex space if you imagine it. So even during inclement weather, the public at the bar can then use the event space as more of a kind of conditioned and protected area. So volumetrically too, just wanted to point out that this footprint at the rooftop is pushed back about 23 feet off of Petaluma Boulevard and about 27 feet off of B Street. And Sam will tell you that we spent a lot of time looking at the project, really the eye level view from the street, because we wanted to make sure that that rooftop and the kind of support space up here really was imperceptible. So you'll see on the renderings, where's the rooftop bar? It's pushed so far back that you can't really see it until you're sort of a bird flying through the sky. So we've included this aerial rendering so you can at least get a sense of what it would be like to have a cocktail up at the rooftop. So I do want to mention, because we talked about art earlier, there's really a lot of opportunities to integrate art. And when we say art, we're looking at local artists. But there is one opportunity, obviously, at the rooftop. And what you see in the renderings is much more of a placeholder. But just wanted to point out that we see the art on the rooftop as something that's locally commissioned and an art piece that's both iconic and maybe even interactive, and it's really for both the guests and the locals too. Talking about, I do want to touch on the exterior and the building materials and elevation. So hopefully the renderings do a good job at conveying some of the materiality, but the exterior is really envisioned as a palette of warm, natural materials. This is not what I call like a paint by numbers building. It's not a stucco box where all the elements are painted different colors. The materials you see is represented in the renderings are natural materials. The majority of the building, sort of this warmer beige and warm gray up at the top, is a porcelain tile that's mechanically hung. And one of the reasons why we explored that material is it's extremely durable. It will always look new. It's very different from kind of some of the stucco counterparts you might see in town. And another big part, or how I like to approach architecture, is using different materials and color to really help reinforce the massing. So you see we made a deliberate change, even though this is porcelain tile and this is porcelain tile up at the 5th floor. It was really important to make kind of a visual change in color and possibly even in texture, so that it reinforces that important massing move that relates to the 45 feet height. Sorry, I've got it. I have to have my notes. I wouldn't have been able to memorize all this. We talked about the modulation and the push and pull of the facade. I'll just point it out here again on the elevation with the balconies, really being playful with sort of in and outs of the buildings. With Diana's help, the design team really carefully considered the surrounding context with the proportioning of the windows. Specifically, we studied them at pretty great lengths. And so you'll see in a lot of the windows we've ganged together on the majority of the facade, and this was really to pay homage to some of the surrounding historical buildings. They have a 4-to-1 proportion. And the frames of our windows are framed in a dark bronze colored anodized aluminum. We've introduced some laser cut panels on the windows to assist with some of the proportioning again, to really emphasize that verticality. And it's kind of a fun and playful way to introduce some of the branding and graphics onto the facade. We imagine it, even though it's kind of a contemporary move, we want this to be sort of a warm decorative accent panel. And you can see it elsewhere on some of the balconies, some privacy panels as well. The windows are set back. They are not flush with the building face, so it is not kind of a flat expression. I mentioned the porcelain tiles, the undersides of the balconies, which unfortunately you can see in the eye level view, the underside of the balconies, and certainly the underside of that outdoor dining experience on the ground floor will be clad in a wood tongue and groove, so something that's really warm. And then the ground floor storefront, we spent a lot of time working on the storefront design. The glazed areas on Petaluma Boulevard South and B Street have a 1/1 light window. In here, this rendering is really showing the restaurant with all of the doors open, so you really can see that indoor-outdoor experience. But wanted to point out that our storefront, again, the rhythm of this relates to some of the surrounding context, and we've introduced an upper light. It's sort of like a clear story, and we've also shown a fritted glass up there to have some visual interest. Another important feature of the storefront is the bulkhead, which is sort of this kind of tile-based expression, and you'll see a lot of tile also introduced into some of the columns at that ground floor. Really wanted to look at some type of ceramic or concrete tile that had a really tactile, a kind of level of detail in that high touch area, and you'll see some examples in town. There's a lot of tile and detail added to that storefront, and again, even though this is a concrete building built with modern technology, we wanted to make sure that there's kind of a level of craft and touch and texture to that streetscape. Okay. We don't have any renderings shown here of the back side of the building, but that porcelain tile really does wrap around the majority of the building. There are some small elements of stucco on the non-street facing facades, but our team's been really careful about kind of breaking down the scale of those building faces and introducing joint lines and detail for added interest. To wrap up, I'm sorry, am I taking too long? Okay. I wanted to kind of take a step back. Hopefully the kind of plans and elevations we've presented allow you to imagine how the building can fit into the context and fabric of Petaluma's historic downtown. And of course, thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to present all of this to you. But taking a step back, we wanted to revisit some of the important ideas connected to Petaluma's local values that hopefully resonate with all of you. First, and I mentioned it earlier in the all-electric, so in a larger effort to ensure Petaluma reaches carbon neutrality by 2030, this is an all-electric hotel, adopting the no gas connection ordinance in the city, which is a climate initiative meant to curb the expansion of fossil fuel infrastructure and new construction. In a similar spirit of conservation, Page itself, we have a building sciences group who helps us understand some kind of sustainability measures, and we're integrating as much of them as possible into the building, including low flow fixtures, drought tolerant landscape, and we'll continue to explore these ideas as the project evolves. Last page, I promise. We haven't talked about parking, and I'll mention it here. The parking is below grade. We are proposing a mechanical parking system, which I mentioned because the mechanical parking system essentially allows us to efficiently fit parking into a much smaller footprint, or in this case, a much shallower foundation. We don't have to go as far into the ground. So we're really further reducing the embodied carbon footprint with less foundation, shorter construction, greater efficiency. The parking garage will have charging stations for electric vehicles, so I wanted to mention that. Talked earlier about the emphasis on the pedestrian experience. We're going to offer valet parking even for bikes arriving to the hotel. And we've worked closely, I didn't talk about it earlier, but there's a critical kind of pedestrian crosswalk along B Street, and we've worked closely with the city engineer to improve that crosswalk, moving some trees, to really make that a safer connection for the pedestrian. Again, we imagine Hotel Weaver as a community gathering place, an opportunity to watch the butter and egg parade from different places where guests can mingle with locals and vice versa. We hope that guests will get to know the shops, the music, the culture of downtown as part of their visit to Petaluma through the hotel. And we're hopeful that this interest and activity will help provide further economic growth for the downtown. And I'm going to leave you with just one other quote from our branding narrative, which I always love, and I hope it resonates with you all. Hotel Weaver represents the inspiring richness and timeless character of today's Petaluma. Deeply rooted in local culture and craft, we provide an immersive gateway guiding our guests to the very heart of this vibrant community. From makers and artists to builders and bottlers, we extract the best of our hometown and channel it into a bespoke hospitality experience, one that stimulates the senses, touches the heart, and tends to every guest with thoughtful, sincere service. And that's, did I get everything? Yes.
For doing that.
Okay, I assume you've all been saving up some questions. Because as you've noticed, we are recording the session this evening. It will be on our website in a couple of days. In fact, I failed to mention my partners in this activity. Dan Like, who's one of the co-chairs of Know Before You Grow. We could not make these things happen without Dan showing up with his box of video and audio equipment. Sharon Kirk's the other co-chair, handling sign-ins. And then Kevin Goulding is our treasurer, newly on board and marvelous to have some financial control. So I should have mentioned them earlier, my apologies. Because we're going to record tonight, what I want is anybody who has a question, queue up over here. Dan will have a mic. In order to make sure that questions and answers moves along quickly, we have a rule. Questions are no more than 35 words, the end of the question mark. No speeches. If you have speeches, catch Ebbie afterwards. I'm sure he'll be happy to hear. But while we're recording, let's keep things moving. So Dan, are you ready to?
I am indeed, yes.
Okay, you want to get over there and
You
if
have
that's
Sure.
better
that works?
voice.
Yeah.
Let's actually step over here further, so we're not in front of the speaker.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sure you've done a lot of market research to demonstrate to yourselves that we really need a hotel of this size and type. I'd like to hear about that.
Yeah, great question. Actually, actually brands do a lot of the market research, but the project proponent before me also did their market research. Petaluma, generally the Sonoma area, also the Napa area, the Northern California generally is actually experiencing a tremendous amount of growth. I think growth also really depends on how it's growing and what it's growing with, right? So is it residential, is it commercial, is it industrial? So Petaluma being a small town with all the attractions that it has, all of the studies that were done with the previous developer, with what we did, as well as what the brand did supported for this project and this type of project, there was actually tremendous support provided by the demand analysis. So that's.
I'll take a couple of the easy ones that I know people are going to ask.
Okay.
That is traffic, water, any special considerations in terms of traffic studies, Petaluma Boulevard being probably the highest traffic street in Petaluma, and then anything more about water saving, gray water, recycle water, all those kind of things, and then any special environmental considerations. I believe the site used to be a gas station, so any encapsulation, any measures like that going on. Thanks.
Great. I'll answer those, and then I'll also ask Jessica to help me with. By the way, I forgot to thank Jessica for the wonderful presentation. You don't have to be cool. You're a very talented architect. So, and that's probably the coolest thing, being as talented as you are. I'll take them as I remember them, but I'll work backwards. So, environmental considerations. So this was a gas station. It was actually cleaned up by Chevron, who was the property owner, and we bought the property after it was cleaned up, or my partner and I, or my previous partner. There was some ongoing monitoring that Chevron had to do as a requirement for the site closure. All of those monitoring activities were done, and the site was actually considered closed, more so to speak, in terms of the environmental language that they use. So, which means that it's been remediated. There was groundwater monitoring to make sure none of the effluents actually made it in the groundwater, and especially concerns about effluents getting into the river. So that was all done and cleaned up and gone. I'll let Jessica answer about the water saving as well as traffic. So as a requirement, as a part of the city requirement, we actually had to prepare a traffic study. But really, I think a simpler answer really is about how people use a hotel. So hotels, as opposed to office, don't have a more or less a peak AM, PM traffic demand. People arrive at all times. Whereas office, everybody gets to work at 9, so everybody comes in at the same time, and everybody's pretty much leaving around 5, so all of that traffic gets, coming and going at the same time. Hotels, people come in anytime, they're checking out anytime, especially for a resort kind of oriented boutique hotel like this. If it were more of a business traveler, they also do kind of mimic the traffic that an office experiences. Before I hand the mic to Jessica, also in terms of water savings, to be honest, really almost everything you buy these days, any kind of an updated fixture you buy is already meets Title 24 requirements, meets all of the water saving requirements. So absolutely, all of the hotel water demand has been estimated. We've actually worked with the city in terms of water availability and how much it uses, and all of the showers, the toilets, everything. The kitchen equipment, not only is an electric consumption only hotel, but also meets all of the water requirement, water savings. But I'll let Jessica
No, I mean, that's
talk
the,
about that.
the benefit of building in California and being an architect in California is we have such strong parameters to which to design. That's a really helpful process. Just to touch on the traffic and parking, I don't have specific metrics, but just to point out one of the big architectural moves, and I'm not sure if you've seen some of the prior designs or iterations, but oftentimes with hotels you have a giant porte cochere and they carve away kind of a portion of the site it's only dedicated to cars. And part of the beauty of doing a boutique hotel like this is we can really minimize that as much as possible. One of the prior iterations did have a really significant vehicular drop-off that kind of carved into really the prime corner of B Street and Petaluma Boulevard. So at the ground floor, there is, and I probably should have pointed this out, but there is kind of a drop-off area that's right in front of the hotel. You know, there's street parking over here. There's an accessible parking space in front of the hotel as well. But that's kind of a minimal move versus creating kind of a larger vehicular experience on the corner. And then the hotel is not self-parked at all. I should have mentioned that as well. It is valet only. So valet would be going around the block, kind of the long ways to access the parking, and then kind of a short move to access the hotel entry.
Yeah, I also want to add that by the way, our traffic study did show previously as a gas station, it generated a significant higher number of traffic than the proposed use. So since it's just dirt, obviously it doesn't have any traffic generation, but when it was a gas station, it generated significantly more traffic than the hotel will.
Well, good evening, and thank you very much for the full explanation and the heart behind it, and the fancy architecture words and rhythm and push and pull. I enjoy that. So, sustainability. We're trying to go beyond that in Petaluma to regenerative answers. And the biggest emissions we have here, few people don't, is not from the cars, it's not from the buildings, although yours is going to be good, all electric. It's from the embedded emissions in all the products and construction materials and all that. So there is a chance here to really make a big step forward. I mean, a leadership role. If all the aggregate and cement that goes into the concrete, you mentioned a lot of concrete in this building, if that were very low emission, I mean, it could be a negative emission project, especially at the aggregate. There's now sources of aggregate that are made from sequestered CO2. It's like fake limestone, but stronger. So anyway, I just put that on the table.
Yeah, no, that's really important. And fortunately, our firm we do have a building sciences group, and then when we're working hand in hand with a general contractor, I mean, right now we're at kind of a schematic design phase, but
this is the time I wanted to put it in now.
No, it's really important to talk about now because it's important to us as well. And certainly just designing to meet California standard is not our goal, but finding opportunities to exceed it. Did you want to say something?
I agree with your point. I mean, it's a very good point. One of the things that we're doing with the concrete structure of the building is it's a post-tension slab. And so it's a technical term, but what that essentially means is that it allows the concrete to be very thin, only 8 inches thick, versus a regular reinforced concrete slab can be 12, 14 inches thick. So we are very mindful of the amount of concrete put into the building, as well as the parking. The mechanical parking system means we don't have to dig. Not only do you not have to dig as deep and have thick foundational walls, there's a giant slab underneath the building that anchors it And that can be minimized because we're not going so deep. So we are very conscious about the noise.
Yeah, and we have a great structural engineer on board, and even at this early schematic phase, Sam and I have spent a lot of time. So with hotels, when you do below grade parking, there's always that conundrum or puzzle to solve where you have a structure that works with your hotel module, and then you have a structural grid that's better for the parking. And you don't really want to spend a lot of concrete transferring that structure. So we've been working really closely with the structural engineer to find, the most efficient and almost no transfer needed. At one point we were looking at a transfer slab, but we wanted to reduce that as much as possible. But I think that the content of the concrete is also something that we'll explore as we move along. Oh, is this our microphone?
Let's see what
So I'm going to go back to parking. So underground, how many spots do you have?
There's 58 total.
And how many rooms do you have?
93.
And you have a restaurant and retail and guests coming and going. Where are those people going to park? I mean, I live right up the street, and I don't want those people parked in front of my house all day or overnight, because you can't park right 2 blocks up. It's 2-hour parking, so they're not going to be there. So they're going to come into my neighborhood. So that's one of my concerns, and I don't think that's ever been addressed. Parking is a huge issue downtown, and it has been for a long time, and we never address it. I've had businesses down here for 25 years, so it's something that we definitely experience. And I just don't know that it's ever really explored enough. We have parking garages. They're disgusting. Nobody takes care of them, so it deters people from parking in those parking garages.
Right, I always park, one of those.
But it's an issue,
right.
and I'm not trying to put this on you.
No,
I'm just saying that it's something much bigger, and then we're adding to it. So those are my concerns.
And what's interesting too is almost 2/3 of the site actually sits in an overlay district, which requires no parking. So the demand, per zoning and code for the project is actually just...
So maybe that needs to be revisited by whoever higher ups the city. I don't know, but something needs to be explored.
Yeah. But
No, I really appreciate that. So this is not just an issue for Petaluma. Parking in any
sure.
community we go,
I'm sure.
if the guests arrive, whether it's for the restaurant or for the hotel, and parking is an issue, where do they go? So clearly we have some challenges, right? It's a small site, and that's why Jessica mentioned the mechanical parking. As far as the code is concerned, I think it's always a good idea to look at the code and look at what's required. Typically hotels are, I hope this is always 100% full, but I doubt we're going to be 100% full. So even if it's 93 keys, usually we end up running, which per our market study, we usually end up running about 80%. And you may not know this, but actually in the hotel industry, 90% is full. Because you always have a couple of rooms that are being serviced, or not have issues with them that are being fixed. So we're probably going to run actually pretty close to that number. And
but you also have employees too.
Right. So that's what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
So with valet, and I live and work near LA. 80 parking spaces, valet parks 100 cars, because they're not designated spaces. There's quite a bit of space down there that valet takes advantage of it. So we've actually worked with a couple of parking consultants, also with the mechanical company that's a parking expert, so we can park way more than the number that's...
the 58 is just traditional parking.
Okay.
It's not really accounted for the valet.
That's how many is marked.
Okay.
And you talk to any valet company, they'll tell you that. But really the other aspect of it is that Petaluma is a walkable city. So even though we have restaurants, we have a rooftop bar, not everybody is going to come to the hotel and park. They come, they park, they tour the city, they're looking at a lot of other things. they stop by and eat at our restaurant. So what's called an internal capture. So it's our guests that are staying there and guests that are coming to visit the rooftop or the restaurant down below. But I think based on what all the experts have told us, and including the overlay study that Jessica just mentioned, it really makes sense the way the number of parking spaces we have and the number of cars that we can fit in the underground space.
Okay. Another question. So you said that another company will take over, as in maybe a Marriott or a Hilton. Is that true?
Well, so no. And actually, this is like a common assumption that a lot of people make. So Marriott, Hyatt, Hilton, they're really not hotel operators per se. And this has been the case for a long time. They basically are an advertising company. They give you a phone number and they give you a bunch of standards and they give you their standards to build the hotel.
Okay.
And you basically use their name and their website. And then everything else is up to us to do. So we'll brand this with one of the brands. So it would be, for example, it would be the Weaver Hotel by Hilton. Okay, so, and also the brands do manage. They manage very few hotels generally in their portfolio of thousands of hotels. They maybe manage, I don't know what the right number is, don't quote me on this, but maybe 5% of them. We as a company are very particular about the management company. So we interview, we don't manage our own hotels. We hire a management company that runs the hotel, but they work for us and they work under our direction. So we will interview a management company that's going to manage this hotel for us, and we give them guidelines on how the hotel should be managed, and that's basically what they'll be doing.
But did I understand you saying that you will build it and you will be part of it? You did say that, right?
Yes.
So how will you be part of it if you're handing it off, so to speak? I mean,
well, we're the owner. It's like if you have a gardener, you hand off the garden to him, but you're not that shoveling.
I understand, but we've had projects in town where people came in, did the big project, said they were part of the community, and they leave. And it makes a big difference when you're not really a part of the community. So that's my concern. This is my town. I'm fourth generation. I love the quaintness of it. I don't want to lose that.
Well, I can only tell you what I can do. I can't tell you what other people have.
I understand, but they promised us too, because I sat on boards and we were promised, and they changed. So that's my concern.
I'm sorry you had that experience.
Yeah, well, no, I have to share that because it is something that we need to consider and make sure that people coming here with their projects are really invested in our community wholeheartedly.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, thanks. I'm David Keller, former council member and former co-chair of the Central Petaluma Specific Plan. So the zoning you're talking about that came through our committee work, that was a 7-year process to get there. So overall, I think this is the right place for a hotel. I like the location. I like the general layout. I do support the question that was just asked about parking and parking adequacy. Our insistence was that parking be on site. So I think that's something you need to address before this goes forward. Where is the entrance for parking?
On B Street. Right
On
here,
where?
Right on that.
So it's past the crosswalk. It's inbound.
Yes, it's past the crosswalk.
So it's over here.
The crosswalk and it's across.
Okay, so through that park card. Okay, and there's a drop-off point in front.
Yes.
Okay. And I like what you've done in terms of the ground floor use. I like the roof and the upper deck. The scale, however, of this massing is out of context and out of scale with what's going on in the boulevard that way. If you want to match what's happening here, or if you want to match that building over there, which have kind of been the terrors of downtown, it doesn't work. I want to see shadow line, I want to see detail, I want to see detail that is visible from the street. This is a straight shot down Petaluma Boulevard. So basically what you have is this 3-story massing with looks like an office building or a shopping center. It's not Petaluma. So I want to see the detail, that richness that you talk about. The words are there, but the ground floor covers that. The upper two decks cover that. This massing, I like the idea of tile, but it doesn't match the kind of detail that you have visually from both directions in downtown. Again, if that's your reference point for the historic downtown, this doesn't make it. If your reference point is Theater Square, fine, but Theater Square is not a great addition to town in its architecture. So I'd really like you to rework, think through how you can provide detail, warmth, texture, shadow lines that you haven't done here. Okay. The other question is on roof capture of water. What's going to happen to that water? Can you use it? Is it going to be used for your waste, for toilets? It could be done for that. And that's an opportunity instead of letting it flow into the storm drain and here. So that's really where I'm at this point. Oh, the other question is, as an all-electric hotel, what's the backup when the electricity goes off for the elevators, for the car park, for any other emergency and living features of both for the guests and for the employees of the facility? What do you have, a generator, or what are you looking at for that?
Yeah, those are really good questions. So actually, let me respond to them one by one. So in terms of the electricity and the water capture, we'll work together. We're looking at all of that in terms of implementing all of those types of practices for rain capture and electricity. And in terms of architecture, I'll take your information, and we'd love to talk to you more. Sure. About in terms of materiality, the exterior, all of those things that you talked about.
Okay.
But we appreciate the comments, though.
All right. I appreciate you being here and talking to the community first.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank
Very
you.
nice to meet you.
Likewise.
Hi. Good evening. I'm Veronica Olson. Thanks for the presentation. I just wanted to ask about your design process and the narrative that you alluded to about being a community kind of oriented place. And I wanted to know if you have any room in this design, or if this process could allow the community to also engage and be a part of this narrative, because I feel that if you're actually saying it's very Petaluma and you haven't really talked to the Petalumans, it's actually, it feels very empty. So to actually have some sort of process where Petalumans, we have a vibrant art community and design community and entrepreneurial community that would be very happy to participate. And that goes to my next question. If you are going to be a corporate hotel, how does boutique hotel and corporate hotel, are there kind of oxymorons? So I want to know, how do you address that? You're marketing as a boutique hotel, and you haven't addressed the community. So there's kind of two things that a boutique hotel would do, and a property that is unique would do. So I just wanted to know how open are you to opening this conversation up if you are intending to be a Petaluma? Thank you.
Okay, perfect. So thank you. First of all, actually, before you walk away, I'd like to, so Heather is our Director of Events and Arts, and I'd like you to exchange information, and I would be happy to sit down with you, go through the thinking process. There was a lot of work that did go into studying. There were photos of all the buildings downtown, worked with the historian in terms of what should be preserved, what should be incorporated. But we're very open. I mean, we'd love to get feedback from everyone. So we'd love for you to sit down with Heather, with Jessica, and we'd love to hear your thought. In terms of also arts, the other aspect of it is, our hotel, and that's exactly why the first floor is designed the way it is. It's very open, as opposed to a hotel entrance where you walk in. We brought the indoor-outdoor so that feel of walkability inside what you experience in Petaluma is actually brought out to the street. So as you can see from that rendering, when you're walking out on the street, unless you look up, you're not really looking at the building. You're seeing that there's a restaurant you could walk in, there's sidewalk tables and chairs, and it feels that way. But also from an art standpoint, what we do as a company that's different than most hotel operators, and that's actually Heather's job, we make sure that there's, a few days a week, 52 weeks a year, there's some events happening in conjunction with the local artists, whether it's music, whether it's painting, whether it's local art representation. So there's always something happening, drawing from the local art. And Heather's literally feverishly always looking for sources, because it's a lot of days to actually program arts and events. But and the only way we can actually make that happen is to reach out to the local art community and get their support and participation. So we'd love to work with you on that, and would love to also discuss with you materials and getting you involved. So if you could exchange information with.
I have worked in hospitality in boutique hotels.
Oh, sorry, and I didn't mean not to answer your question. Corporate and so this is actually not a corporate hotel. So again, just by branding it, all we're doing is, if you go on, so for example, like Ondas in Napa, that's corporate, but very few corporate. So we don't have a lot of meeting space. This is basically for tourists that are coming up here to enjoy food and beverage and their visit to the local area. So I doubt very much corporate events are going to happen here. Probably.
But I think the distinction to make too, and we kind of use like boutique and lifestyle almost interchangeably, right? But there's all the big brands that Ebbie mentioned, like Marriott, for example. And this isn't a Marriott hotel in the traditional sense. A lot of these brands that were mentioned, they have what's called soft brands. So like Marriott, for example, has a brand called Tribute. And what Tribute allows designers like us to do is there's far fewer parameters, right? They don't have parameters about signage, or you have to have a green stripe on the building, or your rooms have to have the X, Y, and Z. There's a lot much more freedom in design, because the lifestyle hotel is much more about the place and the setting rather than the brand itself. And so even though you have the benefit, for example, of a Marriott with Marriott points and the Marriott website, it could be like Hotel Weaver, a Tribute portfolio brand. It's part of that soft brand category, and those are the types of brands that Ebbie's considering for the project.
And then there's just one other point that I'd like to also mention, and that is Petaluma is working on its general plan right now, and we have created a vision for our community, which includes, having organic and green spaces, and also bringing more green into the city. So that would include, on our buildings. I don't know if you're familiar with Hotel Healdsburg. They have greening on their buildings, and they have I think they have a sister hotel as well. So yeah, things like that are kind of more in line with our vision for our city.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, that's another great point. So we love, again, to work with you more. And by the way, before I forget, I really want to give a lot of credit to the staff that have been absolutely fantastic to work with, introducing us to all those kinds of things. Thank you very much. So thank you for the staff as well in Petaluma.
Hi, I had a couple questions. By way of introduction, I was born and raised in Rochester, Minnesota, where this company built 3 other hotels. So I want to ask about those and how you approach the same issues there. The project you mentioned near that neighborhood, historic neighborhood, how you dealt with that. The other Hyatt hotel that was near the historic park, how you dealt with that issue. And the third question was, in terms of ownership, you're intending on continuing ownership in the long term. You're not intending on flipping the hotel with respect to how you brand it or what you call it is different than who owns it. So is that your intention? Thanks.
Actually, yeah, thank you. So those, again, I'll work backwards. In terms of brands, thank you very much. By the way, great to have somebody from in the community that's familiar with our work. In terms of branding, those are different brands. Those are they're not soft brands. So There was an existing Holiday Inn in Rochester that we purchased, and we rebranded it, upgraded it, rebranded it to an Indigo, which is in the same family of hotels, and it's owned and or not owned, but the brand is owned by Intercontinental IHG. So we repositioned that one in the community, and it was really more all internal to the building, and it was a building that was built in 72, I believe, or 76, and so we renovated it. Actually, Jessica was with the company that, in her previous company, that helped us with that project. So that was one project we worked together under the previous banner of her company. And then we also, on the historic park, it's very interesting. That was actually located on the site of the American Legion. Very small site, very much like this one. And we had, that project really had a very specific shape to it, as was a triangular shaped project. And it was on the oldest park, one of the oldest parks in the US. It was actually established by the US military, the US Army, near the Mayo Clinic. And the design and architecture of that project, it's near the senior care facility in Mayo Clinic.
My dad used to live there, so I visited him
fantastic.
Dozens of times and kind of watched the site as it was being built.
Yeah, and very particularly though, the one we did across the street from St. Mary's Hospital, the city, that if you're familiar with that street, it has a very unique zoning because it's actually a row of lots that are immediately adjacent to residences. And so the concern was, even though the city had designated it for a hotel, the community had concerns because right on the street behind it were all homes, the entire street. And so there were concerns about parking, there were concerns about circulation, but also mainly there were a lot of concerns about architecture. So the way we designed that project, very much like what Jessica's done here, is we looked at how would this project work with having the hospital on one side and having all residences behind it. So we actually designed the architecture where in the front of the building it actually was a very commercial representation of the hotel, and as it actually approached more towards the residential, the architecture took a flavor of a residential building. So and made sure that circulation is all serviced from the front street, where there was very little interaction with the streets and the houses in the back. So that's how we addressed it.
Hi, thank you for having me. I totally agree with this gentleman that this does not look like Petaluma. This is not what our downtown looks like. I've lived here 50 years. I moved from San Francisco. This is maybe, it just doesn't look like Petaluma. Also, we've had road diets where I don't know if you have spent much time in Petaluma, but we had more road space around downtown Petaluma, and we don't now. And so the traffic around Petaluma, and I've lived in town for a long time, people drive off the side of the road, off to the other roads just to get through town, just to get to where they need to go, and some people just avoid going. We have taken into consideration when the students get out of school, Petaluma High, Petaluma Junior High, the traffic is congested. I think until you spend so much time in this town and really almost live here for like a year just to see what the traffic is like, I think you'll take more consideration in making it smaller, the traffic around the Bay Area, around the whole town, and that's my concern. But for me, that doesn't look like Petaluma, and this is the Petaluma that I love. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I think we've run down the list here. I don't see anybody else in line.
Dana, who is Weaver?
Well, Weaver is we've hired a marketing company to brand the hotel. So it's really no particular one. It's just the name was selected for this hotel, for this location.
Is that a fixed name or?
No. It will be the Weaver by, and then it'll either be Hyatt, Hilton, Marriott, or someone like that.
But Weaver is the name.
Is its own name. It's a boutique name.
So, but no local connection to Weaver.
That's the logo, actually. Do you have the logo on any of the renderings?
Local connection.
Oh,
not
no.
logo.
These are a Weaver in town.
Yeah, yeah.
Where is the sign that says Weaver Hotel for the hotel?
Right here.
There's a blade
And
sign.
actually, the way we've designed the sign, so it's actually a see-through sign, and the purpose of it is that as you know, you have the sun move, actually the sign shines through, the light shines through the sign itself and reflects it on the building.
There's some great examples in town of some sort of metal signage and that was sort of part of the connection there too.
Ebbie and team, thank you for being here this evening.
Thank you.
Thanks to all of you for showing up. If you like what we do tonight, and we try to do it as often as we can, the standing monthly lunch for Urban Chat will be tomorrow noon at Aquas. We'll be talking about the next Know Before You Grow forums we're organizing, plus other things we want to get involved in. So feel free to come, hang out, listen in, hopefully become part of the group. Again, thank you all for being here this evening.
Thank you very much, everyone.